necessarily what's happening. I have learned to lighten up and laugh. I'll share a couple of things with you. I wrote about some students in my last book. When I was in Nova Scotia, I belonged to an organization called Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia. And I had the opportunity to go out and help students journal. And this one particular school, and I'm not sure why this happened, but the students were told they could not leave that day until they wrote me at least 2 sentences. It didn't even have to be a thank you. They could just write me 2 sentences. And some of the comments were priceless. They were between 11 and 14 years old. The first one said, "I am 11 years old, and I really liked your presentation. You are cool for an old person." Now, interestingly enough, this was in Nova Scotia. The second note said, "Do not talk about Bell Canada. My dad doesn't like Bell Canada, and he says you were never a vice president either." It's a good example of how we can influence the youth sitting at our breakfast table. I went to find him, of course. What happened that morning, the agenda for the speakers was on the kitchen table. His father had been fired from Bell Canada, apparently years earlier. And it had been like 20 years ago. There were no female VPs then. And I guess he just looked at the note and said, I can't believe she's going to talk about Bell, and I happen to know she was never a VP. So this 12-year-old came to school with a real negative attitude. I didn't make him feel any better, but at least I felt better after I found him. With same theme, "I love how you talked about your son. It reminds us that you were young once." Same idea. Now, you know, I tried to dress pretty cool that day and be kind of funky. You know, you're thinking that the kids are going to judge you based on how you dress. And so obviously I didn't do as well as I thought with this note. "Your performance was very good. We didn't expect that when we saw you." Finally, the one that's the most important of all said, "You made me feel important. Thank you for that." And all I did that made this little girl feel important, she had asked a question, and before I answered, I asked for her name. And she said her immediate thought was that she was going to get trouble, because at school, when anyone asked her name, it was because she was in trouble. But when she realized that I just wanted to use her name when I answered the question, she said it made her feel very, very important. I also today laugh about a statistic. I'm not sure if you're aware of this one. The average breast contains 4.5% of your body's fat. So for those of us who have lost a breast, we can say, well, we got rid of some of our body fat along the way. A number of people have felt a need to point that one out to me. During my big job with Bell, I was flown to Montreal to make a presentation to the president, and I knew this was showtime. I knew I was being put on the spot. I knew who the players were that would be in the room. It was an unfair opportunity, but that's the way it was. And I flew to Montreal, and I was a nervous wreck. And as I got out of the car, the cab, I put my high-heel shoe, the heel of my shoe, through the hem of my skirt, and I ripped my hem. So I took the gum out of my mouth, I hemmed my skirt, and I went in, and I made my presentation. But an interesting thing happened. I felt much calmer. All the while that they were peppering questions at me, I was thinking, oh, if you guys only knew what's holding me together up here. Because I've lost my mother, and I know many of us have, I try to share stories that bring humor as it relates to our mothers. And I'm going to share briefly with you a story called Gifts from Mother. And it's about 3 young men who left home and prospered, and they were now at the stage of their life where they could give their mother wonderful gifts, these 3 brothers. So the first one said, "I built Mother a huge house." The second said, "I sent Mother a Mercedes with her own driver." And the third said, "I have got you both beat." You know how Mother doesn't see very well? And you know how she loves to read the Bible? I found a remarkable parrot, the only parrot in the world who has been trained to recite the entire Bible. All Mother has to do is mention the cite and verse, and this remarkable parrot will recite it for her. Soon after, Mother sent out her letters of thanks. "Dear Milton," she wrote her first son, "the house you gave me is so big, and I have to clean the entire house even though I only live in one room." To the second son, she said, "Jerry, I am far too old to travel, and the driver is so rude." Finally, to her third son, "Dearest Donald, you have the good sense to know exactly what your mother needs. The chicken was delicious." I have learned the importance of dreaming. Dreams come true and underdogs come through. My son is and always...
Geez, sorry.
Always... Sorry about that. Always was a dreamer. He quit his first-year university to ski race, not what a single mother wants her only child to do. He went back to school at 30, graduated at 33. He's a CSIA ski pro. He's a golf pro. He and his wife have a successful business. He's a dreamer, and I had to learn to let him do it his way. He came to the office the day he was quitting university to tell me. He would tell you today that he came to the office because he knew that I wouldn't cry at the office. You'll find, do any of you know what a comfort heart is, a little pewter comfort heart? I have some of them outside. I wanted to do something in memory of my mother, and so I founded something called the Comfort Heart Initiative. It's a small pewter heart that you hold in your hand, think positive thoughts, create positive energy. That little heart has raised over $1.5 million for cancer research. Thank you. There are over 240,000 comfort hearts in the hands of people around the world. It's a great idea, or a great example, of what one person can do. I have learned that depression is real and must never be overlooked. It's a serious topic, I know. I suffered depression for the first time in my life after my mastectomy. I asked for help. I got help. I talk about it openly, and women tell me, too, that they are now going for help. I invited one of my managers from Bell, John Legault, to write his own chapter in my book because he's both a successful businessman and he suffers all different types of bipolar disorders. And it's a good example of, with the right help, the right coaching, the right support, we can all make it. I have learned to work on my bucket list every single day of my life. As I mentioned, I got to move home. I wrote some books. I started my own motivational speaking business, and I have my Comfort Heart Initiative to give back. My bucket list changes every day. If you don't have a bucket list, I suggest you make one. If you need to change it tomorrow, that's okay. But it's always good to work on something that's just for you. I have learned to live a balanced life. Remember what I said about having a job is not the same as having a life. So just before I close, I'm going to share one more poem with you, and then I'll mention something else in closing. This poem is called The Dash, and it shapes my life on a daily basis. The dash that the poem is about is that tiny dash that will be on all of our grave markers. So it's the dash that appears between the day of our birth and the day that we leave this earth. And it's that dash that tells your whole story. The poem was written by a young American author by the name of Linda Ellis. I have her permission to share it, to put it on my website. I paid her for that, so please, you're welcome if you'd like to have it, to download it. It goes like this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He spoke of the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of birth, and he spoke the following date with tears when he said, "What matters most of all is that dash between the years." The tiny dash represents all the years she spent alive on earth. Now only those who knew her understand what her personal dash was worth. It matters not how much we own, our cars, our house, our cash. What matters is how we live in love and how we spend our dash. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, treat each other with respect, and more often wear a smile, remembering your personal dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, will you be proud of the things they say about how you've spent your dash? Every night I ask myself how I've spent my dash. Most days I could have done better, but that's okay because tomorrow is a brand new dash. I'm going to close by speaking about hope. How many times when you do a favor for someone and they thank you for your kindness, do you say, oh, that was no big deal? Helping someone is always a big deal. You'll say it was no big deal, but kindness is always a big deal. The smallest example of kindness gives us hope, and breast cancer survivors need hope. I encourage you as you leave here later today to embrace your own hope chest. And I don't mean the hope chest that some of you may have had at the foot of your bed that we filled with things as little girls. I mean the chest, the hope that lies in our battle-scarred and battered chest. Hope matters. Thank you, ladies.